morning, everyone, and welcome to the first appointment of the Happy Fuse Passions in Fashion series. Today we're meeting with Alba Arikha. Good morning, Alba.
Good morning.
Alba, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yes, of course. I am a writer. I've published 5 books, and I'm also a musician, but primarily a writer. And when this lockdown happened, I was busy working on a proposal for a new nonfiction book, and everything was sort of put on hold. And then we went to the country for a month, which was very nice. But I suddenly found it very difficult to work as I normally do. So it's been a turning point in several ways, actually.
So the lockdown hasn't helped inspire you, as rather put plans on hold.
Well, it did. You see, because I write, and because music and writing, both things are basically. Self-isolation is basically the story of my life. I'm always alone. I have done a few collaborations. I'm doing one with my husband now, who's a composer, and we're doing an opera together. But it's just the two of us. It's hardly an outsider collaboration. Although we have a lot of people involved. The singers, the conductor, the designer, the set, etc. But nevertheless, because I'm so used to being alone, there was nothing kind of difficult or overwhelming for me at all in this lockdown. And what I found is that in the very beginning, when it happened in March and I went away, I became quite inspired. And the day before we left, I wrote a poem about the pandemic. Very quickly, a long kind of narrative, 8-page poem.
Wow.
Which I've never done before, I have to say. And then sent it to my agent, and next thing I know, it's being published. So that was a strange, both lovely and kind of strange, in these very strange times, surprise. And of course, after that, I did start researching on this new book of mine. And my daughter, who was supposed to do her A-levels, they got canceled, so she became my sort of research assistant while we were away. But everything seems to have periods of blooming sort of inspiration, and then suddenly things stop and then halt, and then you have to start again, etc. So it's been an off and on process. And I missed my piano very much when we were away, because I do play the piano a lot and nearly every day. And when we came back, I suddenly thought of this piece, which I called Lockdown Piano, which I improvised and found some photographs, and my husband put it together for me, and I did that as well. So it's all, it's all lovely stuff, but it's not, a huge collaborative effort with the world. And I think we all feel this need to connect and to change the way things are, and what matters to us, what are the things that matter, what are the things that no longer do, actually, because I think those are questions, and I know I've asked myself that question recently, and I think a lot of people are, just this reevaluation of life in general, of what matters to us, what's important, what's not. Even going away, I found myself for a month with 2 pairs of jeans and 3 jumpers, and it was fine, and I didn't need anything else. And that was quite something. And you just realize one actually needs much less than one thinks.
And how has it impacted the publishing world? This whole situation, the pandemic and the working from home, probably hasn't affected you that much, as you said. But
I have 2 or 3 friends who had written books and were supposed to have book launches, and those were cancelled, of course. And a book launch is very important for a writer, because not only does it put you in the, you get press, it's in the public eye, but you sell a lot of copies, etc., etc. Obviously, being a writer is a very precarious, not the most lucrative of jobs unless you write a bestseller. So not having a book launch is difficult. A lot of novels and just books in general, I read that a lot of deals have been postponed. Small publishing houses are really struggling a lot. I think the publishing world in general is probably struggling. It's a very difficult time, and it's a very difficult time for writers. And how do you make yourself known if there's no sort of conduit? So the whole thing, the notion of publicists, of PRs and this and that, it's, you can do things on Zoom and you can still send out books for reviews, but I think it's just difficult to make, it's much more difficult to make a splash, to make yourself better known as a writer. Well, it has been anyway during this period. It's been tricky.
So tell us more about what you write in particular about, and give us some example, and tell us about, for example, the poem that you wrote about the pandemic. Why was it successful? What did people see in it, and what did people like in it?
I wrote it in March, so it was still, not everything is obviously, it was still when, people were singing on the balconies in Italy, etc. But in essence, it's a poem about hope. And I think it's very important for us to look forward and to have hope. And the images I chose to illustrate the music were, basically looking forward. Hope, I think obviously a lot of very good things have happened. The skies are blue, we hear the birds, there's much less pollution. There's a lot of very positive stuff that has been happening. Whether it will last or not, I don't know. I really, really hope it does, actually. A lot of people say nothing will be the same. Our world as we knew it will be forever different. I don't know if that's true. I mean, I have no idea. I'm thinking probably not. I think we will sort of go back to a semblance, certainly a semblance of normality, and we'll find our way. I think humanity always does find its way in the end. And we've been through these pandemics before. So this was what my poem was about. But there is something else that happened recently, which is that years ago, when I started doing research on my memoir called Major Minor, which was translated in Italian as well, I was looking for family documents, important documents, photographs, letters, etc. It's about growing up in an artistic family in Paris. I grew up in Paris. And I had just separated from my husband. This was in 2000, it was about 15 years ago or something. And so I took all the boxes and I moved to a different apartment. And when I started doing research on this book, I realized that a lot of important documents were missing. Letters from my godfather, letters from my father, all sorts of really helpful things for the memoir. And I kind of looked for them everywhere and just kind of gave up and stopped looking for them, basically. And the memoir was published. And just the other day, I went to pick my daughter up at her father's house, my ex-husband, who's moving back to Italy. He's moving back to Italy. And I went to pick her up, and there he was standing in the street with a box, and it was that box that I had been missing 15 years ago. And it was like a time capsule. This happened about 2 weeks ago. And so I wrote an article about that, lost and found, and just what it meant to suddenly, I was literally staring into a time capsule, all sorts of things, my son's birth certificate, I have very few photographs of my grandmother, so that was the long lost photograph, and all sorts of things that I had been missing for all these years. So that was very interesting. Well, outside we avoid each other, but inside we're really rebuilding connections, all of us, with family, with friends, with, again, those things that matter to us. And, on fait la part des choses, as we say, and on refait la part des choses, as we say in French. Re-evaluating really everything. So that was quite an interesting discovery.
So a writer and a musician, and you're writing an opera at the moment.
Yes, I wrote the libretto based on that memoir, Major Minor. And Hugh Hudson, the film director, is directing it. I mean, we're meant to be directing this in October, given what's happening. And again, theaters also, the arts in general are a bit in a very delicate position right now. So we don't know what's going to happen to theaters. I very much hope that things will be better by October, but it's very hard to tell, Social distancing in a theater is difficult. But it's meant to be performed in October. This is my second collaboration with my husband. That's one project. And then the other project is a kind of big nonfiction book I can't really talk about, but it's been very slow. I keep being distracted by other things. But yeah, those are basically the things I'm working on now. And I'm thinking of writing a new novel as well.
So the last question, how has your passion supported you through this difficult time, and how in general you think passions support people through a difficult time? How can they be our answer sometimes, rather than distraction or distracting ourselves from what's happening with videos and screens and news? going back to passion, could that be the answer? And rediscovering our passion.
Oh, absolutely. I think, just reconnecting with yourself, with your interior life, self-reflection. We have, slow motion time here, and a lot of things happen in slow motion, introspection, the consciousness, of, just identity in general. And I think, yes, with that, I mean, those have been, they've always been my sort of lifesavers, really. Writing, especially music also, but just writing. And when you write or when you compose, same sort of thing, you're dealing with your inner voice, which is not a spoken voice, but it's a very subconscious voice that you can only access really um, when you're either writing or making music or filming or sculpture. It's a very artistic, creative sort of voice, and that enables you, I think, to forget and to be able to transport yourself into another world. And I think that's what the arts are about. They're about capturing an aspect of the world and interpreting it in your own personal way. And it's traveling really in your mind. So we can no longer travel as we were before. So I travel a lot in my mind, and that's what I've been doing a lot of recently. So,
Well, thank you so much for your time. That was very interesting.
pleasure.
Thank you, Alba.
Thank you.